that will consume the services provided by this SOA service. So here it comes, the code. This is our old business logic, a simple class. So we can have a class called TDS calc, which has got a method which simply takes one argument and returns 10% of the income. Right? This is normally happens with me, in fact. But most of the people, they deduct 10% of my check amount. Right? So there may be complex logic. So because this is the simplest code example, I thought, right? We may have some complex business logic in this method. Right? So it depends business to business how they work. So this code is simply returning 10% of the income as TDS. So a class DLL is created. Now we will have another class, and that is what we call basically a SOA class. I have not used WCF services or WCF application here deliberately, because if we use existing WCF templates, a lot of things is added automatically and our learning is less. So we, in this session, we are doing things from the scratch basically. Now we are creating a service-oriented application class, and in that we have two interfaces, and interfaces are basically service contracts basically. TDS service that has got one method, and that is get TDS. So get TDS is one operation which we want to expose to the clients or consumer, right? So if we want that the contracts we have, the interfaces we have, and the methods in these interfaces are exposed by client, so we need to put these attributes, and these attributes are WCF attributes in spec basically. Operation contract, that attribute specifies that the method is used by consumers. Service contract, it says that this particular interface is a contract which will be accessed and discovered by the client, remote client. We have another service, that is TDS certificates generate service. So ITDS service is the interface for that service, and we have one method, get certificate, and that is again will be exposed to the client. So operation contract, that attribute is enabled. Now operation contract is the attributes for methods which decides whether the method is one way, it is duplex, or it is simplex, or it is response reply, right? So here because we have a response reply, so we by default it gives that response reply, so we are not mentioning any value to that. So by default it is response reply, right? So once we have our contract, we need to implement the methods given in the contract. So we have methods, two methods there, get TDS and get certificate. Now we will implement our first contract, first interface, and that is TDS service. TDS service, we have get TDS method, and that get TDS method, what we are doing here, we are simply using our legacy code, existing business logic, and that is through TDS Calc class. So we've created one object of TDS class, object TDS, and then through this object we are calling the methods available in that class. So method TDS Calc is one of the legacy code business logic we have. We are using that code in this SOA service. Second interface implementation, ITDS certificate generation service. So ITDS cert service interface is implemented as TDS service. It's a class, and we have simply implemented that method by returning a string, and that string here we can have a business complex logic which will from a database, the client. Then after adding all these implementation, we can compile this code, we can build a DLL, and once DLL is built, our SOA service is ready. Once that SOA service is ready, how to expose that SOA service, how to use it. If that service is to be used by desktop clients, we need to supply it through DLL. If it is to be exposed through web services or through websites, so it has to be hosted somewhere on web servers, right? For this code walkthrough, what I have simply here is we are hosting this web service in a console application. When we need to use services provided by this class, the console application has to be running mode, So this console application is the simple way of hosting the services or SOA service we have created. Now the code is very simple here. We have two namespace here, system.serviceModel and system.serviceModel.description. So these are the two namespaces which are WCF specific. Through these namespaces, we will be able to access WCF specific process. Right? And as WCF is a SOA framework, right? So all service-oriented application-related classes would be available there. So one of the class which we use for hosting SOA services is service host. So this service host will take two arguments here. The first argument would be the class of the service, and the second argument is the address where we want to host that particular service. Then, as we have two services here, so I have two instances of the service host here. One is TDS Calc host and other is certificate host, cert host. So in cert host, we have that TDS cert service class, and the address I have used this for the sake of simplicity. I have used another address, and that is HTTP localhost 8080 SD. Right. This is just for making it different from the previous address. Once we have a service host instance created, we need to specify the endpoint. So this endpoint is the connection where the client will communicate with the services hosted by this application. Right? So now we have to add the service endpoint. Right? So as far as service endpoint is concerned, we have three basic things: A, B, C. A is for addressing, B is for binding, and C is for contract. Right. So here in this method, add service endpoint, the first argument talks about the contract, that is C part of the ABC. The second argument that talks about binding, and here it is basic HTTP binding. And the third thing is the address. So this address here, MEX would be appended to the host address of the service, and it will be the endpoint for that particular service. So HTTP localhost 8080/MEX. If we don't put MEX, if we put it blank, so it will take the base address, and that would be HTTP localhost 8080. Similarly, we have endpoint for second service, and that again we have different contract there, and that is certificate service, and we have basic HTTP binding, we have MEX, and that would be appended to HTTP localhost 8080/STSD/MEX. Once we have endpoints defined, then we have to define the behavior of the services. There are some attributes, something which we need to specify behavior. For example, to use the services provided by this class, the client will discover and will try to get some data about these classes, and that we call basically metadata. Right? So metadata exchange, that is one important point as far as service. So we need to add behavior class to HTTP. The metadata exchange through HTTP transport is true for both the classes, both the services. Right. Once that behavior is done,
interrupting, your voice is breaking a lot.
We now consume at the client side. Yeah.
Breaking a lot. I mean, can you please check the audio? We're getting the feedback from participants as well.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's better. We can continue.
Yeah, great. And in this console application, we will use or we will consume the services we have created and we have hosted using the console application. So let us see how the services are accessed, discovered, and then used, right? So we'll come back to this client code. Let us see how the Visual Studio does all these things. So for that, we need Visual Studio. So we are hosting services, so it's better use Visual Studio as administrator. It will have better access to code. And now we see our legacy code, and we will see our right. So this is simple application. We start from the legacy code, and that was our existing business logic. And we have simple method TDS cal, which is simply taking one argument, income as double, and then returning the TDS, 10% of the income, returning as double, right? So this is our existing business logic. Now we want to enhance that business logic, add more methods, and create the classes as service oriented, right? So for that, again, we have one class where we will add some contracts, and we will use our business logic. So this is our SOA class, and in SOA class we have two interfaces, service contracts, ITDS service and ITDS certificate service. In both the interfaces we have one method each, get TDS and get certificate. So once these contracts are defined, we need to implement the methods defined in the contracts, right? So this is the method which ITDS service gives us, and that is get TDS. So get TDS will return 10% of the income, right? And now what we are doing here, we are simply calling our legacy code through this class object TDS, which is CTDS calc object, and that was our existing logic, business logic, legacy business logic, and we have used that method TDS calc, which returns 10% of the income as TDS. And this is our new service method, get certificate, takes string as one argument and returns string, right? And this is the argument which the consumer will pass, and then there would be complex logic for generating certificate, and we will have some good certificate generated. For simplicity, we have here simple string written by this get certificate method. Once this SOA class is implemented, our contracts are ready, then this SOA class is ready to be hosted so that consumer or client can use all these services, right? So what we need to do is hosting the SOA class, right? So as we've already said that we are using simple console application for hosting this SOA class, and here we have simple code, and we already talked about this code, right? So we have service host class used here, and through that we can define our service and the address, and we can define the binding endpoints of the services, once we define the endpoints of the services, we can define the behavior of the services. Once behavior endpoints are defined, we can open the services. Once the services are open, they are ready to be consumed. Now, this service is ready to be consumed. Ready to be consumed meaning, let's see that what happens in our network. So we go to, so let's see what is the network state. Right. So this is the existing network state, and once we run the host, which is hosting our SOA services, so definitely there would be some more TCP connections. So now our service is running, right? So if we want to terminate this, we will press any key or we will press enter, so this service will terminate, right? So we have got this console application which is hosting the services running here. Now we can open another Visual Studio and we can open the client here. Right. So we have options here. So first we will use single. Here we have client as well as so let us open the right. So here we have client, and this is our client, and we've already talked about this code, and let's see how it uses. So we have, these are the things, service references, and these two service certificate and TDS, these are the namespaces, or we can say alias, which are referencing to the services provided by our SOA services, right? So TDS and CERT are two service references. So we can see, in fact, that what all services are running there. So here we have, let's say, what is there at this address. Right, so let's say when we have this address, let's see how many services are running at this service go. Right, so we have a service, the certificate service is running at this, right? We have one more address there, and that was 8080 simply. See what all services are running at this. Right. So we have, this is the base address, and both the services are available at this address. Right? So we can now have service references, and we can use the services provided by these SOA classes. Right? So this add service reference, this is the tool provided by .NET Visual Studio, WCF, which generates proxy class, and similarly it generates some configurations for client through which client will be able to access the services hosted on a particular address. Right? So if this add service reference tool is not there, we will have to select some other utility like service util exe. So here, once we have these two references, so these two references will give us each and everything. So here you can introspect the classes using these references. Say, for example, here we have, now we have two services, so you can easily introspect this TDS cert service. It has got one operation, and that is get certificate. We have another service, that is TDS service, and this is the contract, and through this contract we have one operation, get TDS. Right. So this is what this add service reference gives us. Through this tool we can introspect, we can see what all methods are available in a particular service, what all services are available at one particular address, right? And then we can have service wants is TDS certificate, right? So this is the TDS certificate of Peter for year X, Y, Z. So this is how the communication is happening between this client and the server. So we can have more complex code. So this is the zero level code walkthrough as far as a simple SOA service, SOA service host, SOA service consumer are concerned. Right? So any questions?